Good morning, everyone. We are from Good 10. We want to deliver our presentation of today's topic about discourse and intercultural communication. Our group is consisting of Rima, Puji, Astuti, Zenni Syarifah, and Naufal Daffa. The discussion of discourse and intercultural communication necessarily begins with the definition of culture. The model of culture in this sense is related to anthropology. It is everyday practices arose from normative attitudes and beliefs negotiated by particular groups whose interactions are based on the forms of social organization. The kinds of culture can be broader, such as the culture of isolated tribes that live with their distinctive religious beliefs and practices. Or it can be the urban youth subcultures that shares common attitudes, aesthetic taste, and lifestyle choices. Besides, it can refer to a specific homogeneous group such as members of a professional association and national cultures. Clearly, the most individuals belong to many cultures and they will share the aspects of culture to other people around them. But their attitudes and practices also will be influenced by factors such as their gender, age, geographical location, upbringing, and other group affiliations. Discourse in the forms of gossip, conventional storytelling, blogs, and letters to the press is a means of cultural norms discussion.
Intercultural communication. A distinction that can be made between cross-cultural and intercultural communication is how someone from one culture interacts with someone from another is characterized as intercultural. As Kant observes, cultures do not talk to each other, but individuals do. In that sense, all communication is interpersonal communication and can never be intercultural communication. Even so, we recognize that when individuals communicate, they bring to their interpersonal interaction sets of assumptions and beliefs about normative practice, including communicative practices, and the result from their socialization into a set of broad and specific cultures. When these assumptions and beliefs are misaligned, effective communication can be impeded. Many studies of intercultural discourse are concerned with accounting for miscommunication in terms of the different communicative styles that result from the divergent cultural values that interlocutors bring to the interaction. Bailey cautioned that it can be difficult to determine whether particular social relations cause particular communicative patterns or whether particular communicative patterns cause particular social relationships. If the latter explanation is the valid one, it may be argued that the communicative breakdown between cultural groups is not so much a result of misaligned discourse convention in an otherwise harmonious environment. Rather, intercultural communication is a feature of broader social tensions and conflicts. There were many research into intercultural misunderstanding has focused on groups whose relationship is characterized by conflict, tension, and a differential of power. Indeed, he argues that intercultural communication is characterized by misunderstanding because intergroup engagements necessarily reflects and reproduce an uncertain social world where conflicting groups compete for status and resources. However, as well as accounting for instances of miscommunication over the past 2 decades, intercultural language researchers have attempted to identify and teach a set of competencies and values to help enable interlocutors to minimize the kind of misfires that result from intercultural communication.
Cultural values. The values are core beliefs and practices from which people operate, and each culture possesses its own particular values, tradition, and ideals. While the cultural values are formed through environmental adaptation, historical factor, social, economics, and contact with other groups. So it's basically interaction between people can create the cultural values itself. Then the cultural values are categorized into six. The first one is ethics, the right or wrong, aesthetics, like the notion of beauty and attractiveness, and then the doctrinal, like a political, ideological, religious, or some beliefs, and then innate or inborn, such as reproductions and survival, and then non-use or passive includes the value based on something never used or seen, and then the potential, the value of something that is known to be only potential valuable, like something that can be achieved in the future. Much research about intercultural communication focuses on cultural values which leads to different communicative styles. The influential investigation has been conducted by Hofstede. His work has been expanded but adapted by later researchers such as Tom Penars and Hampton Turner, and also Smith and Bond. This investigation is empirical research distributed by multiple choice questionnaire to decide how members of different nations, especially common culture, commonly behave, or the behaviors and beliefs of employees and management in a company interact and handle the business. In brief, those research suggest that cultural value system basically following these tenets that we will be talking later: the collectivist versus individualist, the teachers of power distance, the roles consensually associated with males and females, or the gender role, and then whether social status is achieved or ascribed, and then also how polite interpersonal relations are established and maintained in a communication. In this research, we will mostly talk about the collectivist individualist continuum, from the high collectivist to high individualist. It is concerns on individual preference to identify him or herself as an individual with personal or and even idiosyncratic goals, or as a member of a group. Conceptual system. The collectivist individualist distinction is similar in many respects to the rival conceptual system by Lakoff in his account of moral and political cultures. And here the conservatives or conceptual system, or like the traditional thinker, tend to assert individual responsibility, while progressive or liberal styles tend to assert the nurturing responsibilities of the collective. And for example, here the exposing conceptual system generates different kinds of metaphor, like the conservative might see the income tax as a theft from the responsible citizen by the less responsible, while the liberals see the income tax as investment by nurturing the citizen to create a fair society. And here we acknowledge that an individual may be collectivist or progressive in some domains, and yet the individuals are conservative in others. Next is the power distance, and here the different degrees of power distance across cultures are often explicitly coded in the use of honorific styles, salutation, and address, and degree of formality in interactions. And high power distant culture acknowledge social hierarchies based on factors such as age, professional seniority, gender, and lower class, while the low power distance culture are more inclined to treat others or a wider range of others as equals insofar as difference in status are not so linguistically marked. And different here, the example is like how individuals address professional colleagues in formal context by calling him directly by his name, or using a honorific Mr. or Miss, and also then following by their family name. And these cultures are established by the conventions. And here it is also applied for some other countries, like in our countries, Indonesia and also Japan's while we are respecting others people or that have a different or distance of the power of positions. Gender roles in cultural value systems such as Hofstede and Traubenar's, the masculine culture privilege material values, assertiveness and success in competitive ventures, while the feminine culture privilege caring, emotion and empathy though as Terminers and Hampton Turner observed in certain contexts such as North America business management, difference based on gender are eroding in favor of the stereotypically male values and male patterns of discourse. This masculine orientation of female business professional can cause friction between those professionals that was sent overseas, like in patriarchal societies, women power tends to be more restricted to domestic domains, which might mean that they are not addressed directly in formal public discourse. Like it is more concerned with the patriarchal or the matriarchal system that is adopted by one nation. And next is the achievement, ascription, and orientation towards problem. And here, issues about cultures that is a value achievement in the functional roles compared to those that ascribe status based on gender as well as the factors such as age, social class, wealth, educational background, and the experience. And here, like people was seeing someone as how they are achieved something or what kind of thing that they have been made to the society, and thus that they is, for example, in the North America and Northwestern Europe, there tend to be more individualists, while the ascription-oriented cultures tend to be more collectivist. And this cultural system may also impact on how the groups discursively address problems. They will see problems differently based on how different groups of society sees what they have been achieved. Communicative styles. This difference in orientation towards particular cultural values result in the range of possible communicative styles. Individuals' orientation to culture can be correlated with low context styles of discourse, which privilege direct and explicit modes of communications. In contrast, the orientation towards collectivist cultural values can be correlated with high context styles that are characterized by the indirect talk and implicit and ambiguous modes of discourse that serve to avoid challenge, thus reinforcing the inner group harmony. And the example like the communicative styles between Asians and Europeans or American, which have different styles of discourse rising from factors such as the length of the conversational turn and interruption tolerance. And also there's an example like when you're in a classroom discussions in the Western or American, usually you are more regarded or valued if you are more active or talkative in the classroom. Meanwhile, in the Asian such as Japan or China's, when you don't have something necessary to talk about, then it is more respected if you are quiet or you are not bringing unnecessary or unsubstantial topic into the discussions. So there are distinctive difference between the styles in the Asian and European or Western style.
Intercultural communicative competence. Intercultural communication has presented the problem that discourse across cultural groups involving participants from diverse conceptual and value systems frequently leads to misunderstanding and can bring negative stereotypes and trigger conflict. Therefore, the pedagogical expansion of intercultural language education is developed. The most influential innovation is the types of knowledge and skill discovered by Michel Prim and his colleagues. It gives interpretative strategies consisting the contrast in values and beliefs, politeness conventions, and social expectations in the common European framework of reference for language. Prim's scheme includes knowledge of interaction style, political education, and attitudes such as openness and curiosity. It is aimed to cope the uncertainties of interaction across culture effectively.
Sample study. In 2007, Crousaw and Harrison serves a case study that brings together several issues discussed above and demonstrates the use of discourse analysis in the exploration of intercultural talk in which divergent assumptions and values are at stake. It draws on the data that Crousaw and Harrison has collected as a part of a project funded by the UK Economic and Social Research Council. They investigate the relationship between student language assistants and their mentors or responsible in the French schools to which they were assigned. The study reported that the UK language assistants often found themselves in situations of misunderstanding and conflict with their French mentors. As part of their research into how the assistant and mentors might handle such situations, Crousaw and Harrison devised critical incidents based on actual experience and recorded the resulting role plays between student assistant and French interlocutor who assumed the roles of responsibles. They then analyzed the interaction, drawing on socio-pragmatic interactional principles as discussed by Spencer Atte and Jing, and on a model of discourse adapted from Sinclair and Coulthard, Burton, Coulthard and Montgomery and Sui. In the particular study reported here, they focus on the management of rapport between two sets of assistants and mentors, Gil and Laure and Claire and Natalie, respectively. The critical incidents are scenarios in which Gil as Laurie help to control a disruptive class and Laure is surprised to find that Gil is not trained to a level she has expected, and Natalie negatively appraised Claire for taking the initiative to use videos in class rather than traditional grammar exercises that she said to back up her own lessons. In their analysis of the recordings, Crousaw and Harrison demonstrate how conflict talk is constructed from what they term focusing acts, challenging moves, and assessment. The first term is focusing act. Focusing acts are used to control the direction of the discourse. In her contribution below, Gill summarizes the problem she is having with an unruly class and then makes explicit her query, adjusting volume and body language to give her plea salience. Similarly, in her negative appraisal of Claire, Natalie focused on the situation from her perspective. The second term is challenging moves. According to Crousaw and Harrison, a challenging move is one that engages directly with the previous utterance, challenging its validity or its completeness or its comprehensibility. The two focusing acts above are challenged. Laurie suggests that Gill should already know how to deal with unruly students. Claire and Natalie become embroiled in a dispute to learning aims and authority, whereby Claire first challenged Natalie's reading of the situation, and Natalie then challenged Claire's assumption of authority. The last term is assessments. Conflict talk is also marked by assessment in which the speaker explicitly states his or her opinion through an evaluative generalization, an evaluative description, or a rhetorical elicit in which the speaker presents a perspective through a rhetorical question that is designed to prompt acquiescence rather than information. Here, Natalie used a rhetorical elicit to prompt Claire's agreement with her own perspective. Crusoe and Harrison conclude that the source of misunderstanding, exemplified by Natalie, derives not simply from her role and status as a teacher, but to her self-esteem and hence her identity as a citizen. In other words, it is broadly cultural rather than narrowly political. While Crusoe and Harrison do not appeal directly to the cultural value system proposed by Hofstede, Schompener, and others, it is possible to relate the exchange between assistants and mentors to these models. In some respects, the cultural divide between the interlocutors might be expected to be relatively small. Both sets of interlocutors were from Western Europe. In respect of power distance, both sets of assistant and mentor acknowledge in hierarchical status. This contributes to the tension in the relationship. The gender of the interlocutor is less of an issue here, but age and experience are clearly factors that affect the exchange in different ways. Both the discourse revolve around the assistant's and mentor views of their relative status, whether achieved or ascribed. Laure assumes that Gil is more experienced than she is, simply because she has been appointed to the role of language assistant and is disappointed to find out that she has not achieved the competence to deal with problems on her own. Gil, in her turn, is unsure what kinds of action she has the right to pursue. Examples of intercultural discourse can be interpreted in relation to divergent values held by different groups. The discursive exchange can be viewed as means of clarifying and negotiating these values. As Crusoe and Harrison point out, although a working compromise was reached, neither party was happy with the outcome and felt that further repair would be necessary to put their professional relationship on a proper footing.
Well, to sum up about this research into intercultural communication, here we mostly use the large-scale questionnaires, focus group interview, and the analysis of actual interactions. Thus, those will become in the form of triangulist approach, generalize quantitatively, and apply them to describe instances of intercultural communication quantitatively.